Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Keep It Science. We are back and with a bit of a twist. This time we are shining a light on rare diseases, from insights from biotech leaders and specialist clinicians to personal stories from the people impacted the most. Now, we say rare, but over 300 million people live with rare diseases. That's roughly about 1 in 20 people face years of diagnostic journeys with limited treatment options and struggle with diseases for the rest of their lives due to a lack of a cure.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cooler, and for me this season is incredibly personal. I have myself a rare autoimmune disease, which includes scleroderma, dermatomyositis, and secondary Raynaud's, which is called an overlap disease. And so as a scientist and rare disease patient, I hope to contribute insights from both of these worlds in this season.
And I'm Dr. Nick Gorn, and together with Elizabeth and a variety of guests, we'll explore everything in rare diseases, the science, the stories, the struggles, and most importantly, these exciting breakthroughs that we're seeing every single day. Hello and welcome to Keep It Science. In this episode, we're going to be exploring something that sits right in the heart of everything that this podcast is about. What it means to live with a condition that the healthcare system wasn't quite built to understand, and what happens when scientists decide to do something about it. My guest today is Dr. Jason Mellad, the co-founder and CEO of OtoImmune, a Cambridge-based precision immunology company, and the co-creator of Moi Health. We were having a discussion before as to whether it was moi. Stay tuned for that. A digital platform built specifically to help people living with autoimmune and immune-related conditions make sense of their own data, their symptoms, and their care. Before founding OtoImmune, Jason built a very impressive track record. And to be honest, if I was to list everything that you've done, I might be here for the entire podcast. You built an impressive track record in the Cambridge life sciences world, from Cambridge Enterprise to Horizon Discovery to becoming the CEO of Cambridge Epigenetics to co-founding Start Codon, one of the UK's most respected healthcare accelerators, and now backed over 29 transformative health companies. Deep breath. It's great to have you, and it looks like you got your PhD in medicine from Cambridge, and then Cambridge sunk its hooks into you and never let go. They're lucky to have you.
I'm lucky to be here, Nick, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you so much. Before we sort of want to talk about what you're building now with More Health, I'd love for you to sort of set the scene for our listeners, many of whom we'd learn, patients themselves, carers, but equally to many non-experts too who might be listening and want to learn more about your area and what you've been looking at.
Sure. So autoimmunity is a space that I've just really started to understand in the last few years because of personal reasons. Friends and family have been afflicted. Many people have spent so long to get diagnosed. And the reason being, autoimmunity is when your immune system starts to attack your own body. We know that immune health is so important, but we don't really pay as much attention to it as possible. In terms of what people are used to, if you have allergies, that's when your immune system is overreacting to stimulus when it shouldn't be. If you're getting sick all the time, like I did when my kids first went to nursery, we all know that. Your kids come home, you get every bug going. It's because your immune system might be a bit weak from all those sleepless nights and the stress you're undergoing. So everything that's around you, catch it. What we want to do is find balance. And autoimmunity is about the lack of balance. It's when your body is a bit overreacted and it starts attacking your own organs, either in response to an external stimulus like gluten and celiac disease, or just constantly being triggered like people can occur in lupus and other conditions. So we're trying to raise awareness that this is a common disorder that many people are afflicted with. There are multiple types of autoimmunity. Most people are suffering in silence, unfortunately, and that only does change begin with awareness, but also with better tools and better care pathways. So that's what we're really fighting for.
Perfect. Yeah. And one thing that comes up again and again on this podcast, this series of this podcast, is the idea that these diseases never come alone, and that autoimmune conditions are particularly associated with a cascade of secondary conditions or infections. Raynaud's is a big one for my usual co-host, Elizabeth, even cancers as well. So, these side effects that you see as well can include things like fatigue, the huge mental health impacts that we've talked about in a couple of episodes before. Does that resonate with what you see in your work as well?
It definitely resonates. And I think that we underplay just how much impact these conditions have on the patient and their family and cared ones, as well as the system. We know that 1 in 10, at least, of us, 10% of the population globally, has an autoimmune condition that we know of, and it's increasing, particularly in urban environments. We know that 80% of those, up to 80% is estimated, are women who are suffering, but it's not clear why. And there hasn't been enough work done to understand why it's so skewed towards women over men, although men are often underdiagnosed because they're not going in and getting checked up on enough. Whereas women are underdiagnosed because they're ignored by the system and told that maybe it's your hormones, maybe you're just a bit stressed, maybe you should relax. That's why it can take so long to be diagnosed, because these conditions are quite varied. And as you said, there's so many comorbidities that can increase your risk, like obesity, or even if you're a smoker, it can increase risk of certain autoimmune conditions. And if you have one, it can really impact your life, from how you can operate on a daily basis, from chronic fatigue. There's a big increase in mental health challenges for people with autoimmunity because it's so taxing on the body. Some of that is physiological. A lot of it is just mental from the stress. But those things have a knock-on effect. And ironically, you would think that medication would be the answer, but often the side effects for the medication can be just as bad as the condition itself. There are some really harsh, very blunt instruments we use to treat autoimmunity. Drugs like methotrexate, which have been around for years, but started life as a chemotherapeutic. So imagine hitting somebody with a drug to knock out their immune system, but the consequence is they're prone to infections. They're even more exhausted. It can cause very severe damage to their organs. So you're trying to balance liver and kidney function, trying to balance gut health with these drugs, trying to balance some of these side effects with the damaging effect of the immune system attacking your body. So all these things are about finding a compromise, and it's really tough.
Wow. Just to go back on one of your crazy stats on 80% of the incidences being women. Do you have any more on why that's the case? Is it just the fact that men don't go in and get diagnosed with these things, or?
I think it's many factors. I think that the lack of diagnosis in many men has a contributing effect, but I don't think it's going to make a big dent in that number. I think that physiologically, women are just built differently. There are a lot of studies that have been published that women have very robust immune systems, which you can imagine from evolution makes sense. And it may be the case that at some point, that robust immune system that served well in the early days doesn't serve well over time for certain conditions. So there's always a yin and yang, right? Stronger immune system may mean that you're more prone to autoimmunity. Weaker immune system, which some scientists have proposed that men may have, might mean that man flu is real. Listening up, man flu might be real, but it might also mean, yeah, it might be real, but it can also mean that maybe men are less prone to develop certain autoimmune conditions. It skews depending on the condition too. I should make that point. For example, Hashimoto's, which is a form of thyroiditis that leads to hypothyroidism, is by far more prevalent in women than men. But there are some autoimmune conditions where it's about 50-50 or slightly skewed towards men. So there's nuance to those numbers, but we do know that overall, women are the most impacted. And we also know that overall, women are not being served by the health system as much as they should be. And so we need to fix that.
That's a really interesting area to dive into further. I think maybe on another episode of this, I'll talk with Elizabeth about this, because she's my podcasting partner in this, and this series is kind of all about her, really. It's her passion project that I've sort of roped her into doing, because she's got some overlapping conditions herself. And one thing that I now know from this series, after speaking to all of these patients and all of the charities that we have done, or everybody in industry, is that even when you get that diagnosis, getting your symptoms to be taken seriously in day-to-day clinical interactions is an entirely different battle. You arrive to get blood test from your GP, letter from a rheumatologist, that could be 3 months old, a notes app full of symptoms, nothing seems to connect. Does that match to what you hear from patients or people that have used autoimmune or Moi Health?
This is exactly the story that we have lived ourselves as a team and what we hear from patients. We started off with this passion because I'm a caregiver for, several family members who have autoimmune conditions that are severe. My co-founder, Dan, has been battling his own autoimmune condition for over 20 years now, and that was a huge inspiration for me and for us. And we have several team members at AutoImmune who have been diagnosed with autoimmune conditions themselves. So we're a community of people who lived it and understand. We also conducted a 5,000 patient and clinician survey last year, and exactly the things you brought up, Nick, came up time and time again. It takes forever to get diagnosed. And once you have that diagnosis, something like 45% of people, it's been predicted, have an initial misdiagnosis. So even getting the diagnosis is not the first step. Once you have a diagnosis that sticks and you have a care plan, which care plan do you go for? There's not enough precision in immunology, and that's what Wa Health is being developed to address. What we are concerned with is what each of us as an individual needs to do for our own health and well-being, as opposed to just generic advice. And the best way to do that is to give patients the tools they need to record their symptoms, to understand what's happening with their bodies, and to work with their clinician to figure out what the best care plan is for them. Not just what the guidelines suggest, but does that make sense for you? In particular, one of the things we've noticed in oncology, they're getting away from just categorizing people as breast cancer, liver cancer, etc., and thinking more about what's the underlying driver of your cancer and what's the best way to treat that tumor. We need to do the same for immunology. I reckon that there's so much overlap between these conditions. We got to get down to root causes and then treat that rather than bucketing people into lupus, RA, celiac, etc. A lot of overlap, and more effective treatments come from treating us as individuals.
Yeah, personalized healthcare is the future. We've heard that from a lot of people, and it's so clear that no two bodies are alike, really. And symptoms show up for one person, they don't show up for another, and that can lead to 45% misdiagnosis. That's absolutely crazy statistics. So I wanted to discover a little bit more about you. Like I said, I think we met when you were running Start Codon, but you had quite a journey before that, academia to Cambridge Epigenetics, to Start Codon, and then now AutoImmune, More Health. What was the moment, or that series of moments where you said, this is the point that this is the point now where I want to change fields or move into this for the next chapter of your career? Was it DAM that you've mentioned already?
So it's been an evolution. I'm very fortunate that I grew up with a scientist and professor dad, and my mom, who was a social worker and entrepreneur. So I'm a combination of their ideas for social justice, but also for wanting to be entrepreneurial and wanting to be a scientist. So I'm kind of a combination of all three. And that entire kind of CV summary that you said has led me to the point where I was ready to do something I was really, truly, personally passionate about. My first inspiration for this was my mother-in-law, Mirto, my husband's mom, who has rheumatoid arthritis and has been suffering for some time. And what stood out to me was, in the middle of Start Codon, trying to figure out what I wanted to do long-term, I really enjoyed supporting so many other founders to get up and running with their ideas, but I missed building something directly myself. I really wanted to be back on the cold front. It's kind of like having a football team, you're supporting all your players, and you think, I really miss being on the field myself. Like it's nice to have a team, and it's great to support them. It's like, I really want to be back on the pitch. So thinking that through, we went to Greece after COVID with our two beautiful, rambunctious kids so that they could meet their grandparents for the first time. And because my mother-in-law was on methotrexate and her immune system was suppressed, she caught a cold from our youngest son. And she went from a joyous occasion to being in bed for about 3 weeks. And they couldn't break her fever, and then they took her off the meds, and then her arthritis came rearing back. And it was a really powerful moment for me. She came into the living room, and she was just so upset. And she said, I can either be with my grandkids, or I can use my hands, but I can't have both. And that struck me. And then I started learning, and I started understanding and diving into what autoimmunity was. Because until that moment, I didn't even know that there was anything wrong. And I felt so awful for that. And when I went back and had a discussion with Dan about what we would do post Start Codon and how I had this inspiration, he then told me that he'd been struggling for decades, and I had no idea. I knew that he'd been ill and he'd to take time off from work to go to the doctor, but he was just suffering in silence too. And that's when it was another big pivotal moment for me. I said, wait a minute, how many people out there need better care? And so both of us looked at each other and said, what do we really want to do with our lives? We want to make it better for the Mirtos, the Dans, and everybody else out there. And that's where AutoImmune came from. Auto is actually OTO. It doesn't just sound like autoimmune. It's from a Yoruba word, which means unique. And so we believe everyone has a unique immune system, and hence the inspiration for auto. And then moi came from my autoimmune. So it's an acronym, but it also means personal, moi. So we knew a huge part of the struggles that Dan has had, that Mirto and so many others listening can probably resonate with, is not being treated as an individual, not having the tools to take care of their own health. And all that came together and inspired us to say, all right, now's the time to get back on the pitch and really make a difference.
Wow. So as a marketer, hearing your breakdown of what the names actually mean as well, that is just perfection. I suppose that brings us nicely onto what AutoImmune do and what health do. Could you sort of give us a breakdown of what you're doing day to day, who you're serving? Give us the full breakdown if you wish.
Sure. So AutoImmune is what we call, let's say, the parent company, the big mothership. And what we're trying to do is discover new biomarker signatures for the earlier detection and better stratification for care of autoimmune disorders and many inflammatory conditions. Long COVID, autoinflammatory conditions like the ones that are in my family as well. These are all things in the immune space that we want to help address, but we're starting with autoimmunity because it's such a huge problem. That involves developing novel tools, partnering with drug developers, partnering with clinicians to really do discovery, as well as working with them to develop novel therapies and get them to the right patients at the right time. We've launched Moi Health as a way for us to really help patients directly. So that is a toolkit that allows you to track your symptoms on our app, the medication you use, record your full family history, something that's so important in autoimmunity, and especially when they're rare conditions. Usually there's one or more people in your family that has it, but we want it all together in one place, integrating your wearables as well. All that information comes in, and we help you identify your triggers, your relievers that can make you feel better, and better communicate with your doctors. When you go into that appointment, instead of focusing on just one symptom at a time, you can say, here's my summary. All of these things are connected. Please don't treat them in isolation. And hopefully through that, we can fast track diagnosis and better treatment. And so the two work well together. AutoImmune is doing discovery work and partnerships. Moi Health is helping patients, and the two are collaboratively trying to make sure that we bring the best treatments and best diagnoses to the patient, but also making sure the patient gets access to the most cutting edge research and ideas.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned wearables as well. Could you break down a little more about wearables in this? Because that's a huge area in itself, isn't it?
Of course. So we were clear that we wanted to have 5 pillars with Moi Health. So I've talked about the digital and the app. We have wearable integration, which allows you to make sure that things you're tracking on a regular basis, like your heart rate, your sleep patterns, etc., all that can lead to flares or can help you relieve flares when you have an autoimmune condition. That information has to be integrated together. We realize that integrated insights is so important. So we also have health tests like whole genome sequencing and blood tests. We have access to clinicians. We're building a community. And we also are going to be having perks later on to help people get access to the best treatments and therapies, but also lifestyle changes like going to the spa and having a cold dip, or maybe having different creams that might work for your psoriasis. All that's coming together. Wearables are important because that real-time continuous feedback of data is so helpful for understanding exactly what are the patterns in how your immune system, which is dynamic, is changing over time. So we realized that it's not just tracking your symptoms and your medication. It's not just the wearables that are important. It's not just a health test. All this information has to come together in one place. I have a story from my husband where it's a good example of this. He is a carrier for beta thalassemia, which is known as Mediterranean anemia, which means he's always anemic. It's something that evolved over time for protection against malaria in the Mediterranean, similar to sickle cell in Africa. And he went to the doctors for a regular blood checkup, and they said, oh, you're horribly anemic. And he went, oh yeah, it runs my family. And they said, oh, but the guidelines say if you're this anemic, something serious could be going on. Maybe you have some internal bleeding. So they rushed him for an emergency colonoscopy and endoscopy. So of course we were freaking out thinking, what's going on? Thankfully the results came back, he was normal. And they said, we think you're just anemic. And he went, I told you I'm just anemic, it's genetic. But he didn't have the evidence to really bring it together and prove it to them. So wearables, genetic information, blood tests, tracking, all that coming together, we want to give people the evidence they need to be taken seriously, but also to explain what's happening to them, because he's anemic genetically. Some people are anemic because they have low iron. but they might present similarly on the test. So you need to have that context.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the business model for this, are you working globally already, or is this launched in conjunction or collaboration with the NHS, or how is it working so far?
We started intentionally in the UK because we know that there's so many people here with these conditions, but also that is a great base for us because we wanted to make sure that we were bringing value to our home turf. I'm American, as people can tell, but I've been here since 2004, so 22 years is officially my home. And I know the UK really has a need for tools that can improve the healthcare system, and then to build the evidence we need to work with the NHS. So we're starting in the UK, we're starting direct to consumer, we're working with clinicians as well. We'll build up the evidence we need so that the NHS can adopt us, hopefully, but also the evidence we need to go abroad to the States and elsewhere. So it is very important that we are adding value right here, right now. I think too often innovations are developed in the UK and we don't benefit from them at home turf, and that's just not right. So we aim to fix that.
Yeah, no, I can 100% see that, and yeah, it's great to hear that we're winning from the start with more health and autoimmune. I suppose I could move on ever so slightly to a little bit of stalking that I did pre interviewing you. There was something on your website that said the system wasn't built for your lived experience, and that felt very. It's almost rebellious in a way, and I really enjoyed that because it's sticking it to the man, saying, you know, this system is broken and we're here to fix it. It's quite rare that you'll see a company with that tone of voice, I guess. Yeah. So when you were designing autoimmune and now more health, figuratively sort of speaking, who was in the room? Who's it specifically designed for and with?
So it was a room full of rebels. So you can imagine, right? Rebels with lived experience. We watched our loved ones go through it. We've gone through it ourselves. Like this, we're going through it still. This is something that we're very passionate about. But I do want to make it clear, we're rebellious in a way that we don't want to say that the system is broken. I think the system works well for some people. It just doesn't work well for all of us. I think that's clear. We spend a lot of time talking about it's broken, it's broken, it's broken, we have to fix it. You're like, actually, you know what? I think it does serve some people really well. It just doesn't serve all of us well. So where our rebellion, our evolution and revolution is, let's make sure that we can help people get better care out of the system and make sure that the system is going to benefit us all. So I'm not here to beat up on the clinicians because I know they're exhausted. They're doing their best with limited resources. What I want to do is make their jobs easier for them. I want to make lives easier for patients. I want to help pharma get more life-saving cures and treatments into the NHS and other healthcare systems. I want to help the NHS save money and have more cost-efficient care. I want clinicians to be able to make better decisions and to be able to diagnose earlier instead of, on average, 4.6 years it takes to get a diagnosis for some conditions. I want to help patients get detected earlier and get treated better and maybe even prevent them from getting ill in the first place. Together we can do this, but what we need to do is empower patients to really become that so-called CEO of their own health and enable clinicians to listen and act accordingly. So our revolution, our real radical thought is, you know what? The system is what it is. Let's get the best out of it. Let's go.
Love that. And I loved, I mean, if you haven't already got it on your website, something around evolution, more evolution, less revolution. I think that's a fantastic way to put it, and you can have that. We'll keep it science. We'll give that to you. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to talk about everything without talking about the significant challenges in growing autoimmune and more health. Digital health as a whole is a crazy landscape. Regulation changing daily and hourly. Patient trust funding, NHS integration, all of these things are significant challenges. What is the hardest thing that you say you're doing right now?
There are a couple, but I'd probably say the hardest one right now is the education piece. Because we've built the infrastructure to be able to provide a digital platform and access to health tests. We know how to engage with clinicians, and we have a roadmap for how we can integrate with the NHS and integrate with systems abroad as well. We understand the drug developers because we've collaborated with major pharma and biotech for years. But the lack of real awareness of how many people are impacted by autoimmune conditions and just what is costing the system, I think is a big hurdle that we have to overcome. Because going out there with a great solution is only as good as the people who want to take it up. And unless they understand the magnitude and the impact of the challenge that we're facing as a community and why everybody should lean in and be supportive, then you're fighting an uphill battle. So we are learning now that a lot of what we're doing is just educating. So many people have these conditions and nobody knows, not even their own family members. So many people have been undiagnosed and they're in the system. Maybe they've been misdiagnosed, maybe they're bouncing around, and it's costing employers, it's costing family members, it's costing the NHS. But we're trying to bring the evidence so that everybody understands why this is an issue. I think if you speak to the average autoimmune patient, they will say that certain conditions get a lot of attention publicly. If somebody has oncology and cancer, we know how to act, it's highlighted, and we really have that support. With autoimmunity, it's assumed, you'll be fine. Yeah, take your drug. Oh, that doesn't work. Take another drug. Oh, it's probably all in your head. Maybe it's stress. And it's so dismissive, but these are really debilitating and life-changing disorders. So education, massive hurdle we have to overcome, but we do believe that we and others are developing effective solutions, but adoption comes from that awareness.
Yeah, Elizabeth is sitting in the background, and I'm sure she's just going, yeah, tell him, Jason. Yeah, she's just sent me a little message now, just saying yes. So she loves your call to action. What I always like to do, and what Elizabeth does as well in these interviews, is sort of end with a bit of a dreamer question, looking sort of beyond your immediate roadmap. Obviously, Moi Health is in its infancy, and you're in the launching period. You're getting everything up and running. But what does success look like for you in a certain amount of time? What's your roadmap here? I suppose not just commercially, but that's got to be an element of it.
I would love to live in a world and help it come to fruition where we are detecting and screening for autoimmune conditions, and then we have effective interventions to stop them in their tracks. There have been several studies that have come out that for many autoimmune conditions, if you catch them early enough and really hit them with a heavy dose of the right medicine, you can stop progression in its tracks. I think prevention and early detection are so important. We need to get down to a wellness care system instead of a sick care system. I'd love to have better support for those with rare diseases and conditions. Just being diagnosed is not enough. We really need to understand that all of these patients and their families need proper support and that it pays dividends. It's not just, oh, this person needs taking resources. It's not about that. It's about the knock-on positive effect we have as a community. I would like to see more groundbreaking therapies adopted abroad and here in the UK by the NHS. And I think that companion diagnostics can help us get there, knowing which patients would benefit and making sure they get those drugs with the economics. And fundamentally, I want to get to the point where no doctor is confused by a patient's random symptoms to the point where they're in the system and they're being dismissed. They should all be educated so that we can cut down that diagnosis time from 4 to 5 years down to a few months, so that people are really taken care of in the way that they deserve. I think that's the thing that resonates with me the most. We want to create the healthcare system that we all deserve. And I believe that we can make that possible.
Yeah, I know from conversations with Elizabeth in the past, she said that doctors, sometimes often don't even touch autoimmune because they're so complex. They're so, it's a really complicated area, and it's just not as understood as it should be.
Well, you can imagine there are a lot of specialists out there, but autoimmunity exists across so many different specialisms. And so nobody really owns it. Even rheumatology, that's one aspect, but you've got neuro, you've got endocrinology, you've got your GP, you've got pulmonologists. There are loads of specialties that tend to be focused, most of them on tissues, but autoimmunity is affecting the entire body. So we need holistic care. It's a different model of care, personalized and holistic and joined up. And I believe that with rare diseases and autoimmunity in particular, if we get this right, it's a model that will serve across the healthcare system.
And what's your sort of take on centralized healthcare? GPs are often so overwhelmed. Is that what falls to the patient in this?
I think that we all have a duty of care to ourselves. If something is wrong, we need to be in tune with our bodies and flag it early. If we are better able to look after our stress levels, our sleep, our diet, exercise, being around people who are positive and supportive, that can go a long way to helping reduce some of the burden on the healthcare system so that it frees up the resources so they can support those who are in really great need. A lot of conditions are lifestyle impacted. And if we are not trying to really optimize for those parameters, then the knock-on effect of making our conditions worse, we have a part to play in that. There's a lot of accountability that we have to have. And I think it can be easy. And we all fall into this trap. I know I have, and I admit that openly, where we blame the system, where we blame the doctor. Why aren't you paying attention to me? Why aren't you giving the care that I need, etc.? But we also have accountability for ourselves. And so what we want to do is not beat up on the doctors and the NHS, not put all the blame on the patients, but let's say we're on the same team together. How can we work more effectively? And it is on us to say, okay, I'm not going to ignore that symptom. I'm not going to just go into a meeting without being educated myself. I'm here, adult to adult, not parent to child, adult to adult, working together so that we can both improve my health and also make sure the system works well. Both of us have to come to the table. So it's not just on the NHS. Patients, we have a part to play as well.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to round up. And I will pester you for one more thing. I think you've had some fantastic, very eye-opening statistics on, the 80%, and then the 45% of misdiagnosis. And do you have any others up your sleeve that you really want to get out?
Let's see. There are several. I would say that one that struck me recently was that something like 1 in 4 patients who were initially diagnosed with IBS actually have celiac, and they had no idea. And that was striking. Wow. And it just taught me that a lot of times we get a diagnosis, as we've said, and we think, okay, now I'm all set, great. But it just doesn't feel right. And you know something is wrong, and you don't know quite what. And then years can go down the line, you're doing damage to your body. And then when it's diagnosed, you're like, oh, I wish I'd known that 5 years ago, but now my gut is ruined and it's not coming back. So I think that is one of those sobering statistics where you say, I had no idea. It's an education side as well. There's another statistic where at least 25% of autoimmune patients have more than one autoimmune condition.
Yeah.
Certain autoimmune conditions can make you more prone or more likely to develop others. There's a connection between the two. So there can be a connection between, let's say, celiac and IBD or type 1 diabetes and others. So people might get diagnosed with one and they start developing symptoms and they think, oh, they're kind of ignoring it, but it's actually the condition evolving into another. 25% at least. We think the number could be significantly higher than that. So there are a lot of statistics, but those are the two that immediately come to mind. And more than the statistics, it's people. I think that's what's key, because numbers can also be misleading. When you see some of the low, more rare conditions, oftentimes it's only rare because we're not looking for them. And there are people out there who are having random symptoms that they're dismissing, and it could be autoimmune. And if you did something about it now, then you would be able to have a much better outcome. There are also people who are listening and you're actually healthy. Maybe you have a vitamin D deficiency or something else, or maybe iron deficiency, and you have symptoms that are very similar to autoimmune, but they could be addressed in different ways. So we want to address that population as well. Not just people with autoimmunity, but those with symptoms that are similar that have solutions that means they could be healthier, and reassure them that they don't have an autoimmune condition. It goes both ways.
Yeah, conversations I've had with Elizabeth, she said that she's collecting autoimmune conditions like their Pokemon cards. So yeah, that's some sobering stats for you, and yeah, nicely wound up at the end as well with talking about it being more about the patients. So that's all. I will stop pestering you now for more information into that. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a good conversation. And, what you're building is exactly the type of thing that could change day-to-day reality for so many people living with these conditions. So thank you on their behalf as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. It's been great. And if anybody's interested in helping themselves or others, please check us out at moihealth.com, and you can find us online. So thank you very much.
Yes, I was just about to give you your little outro, so I'll do that now. So you've just heard from Jason Mellad, co-founder and CEO of AutoImmune and Moi Health. If you want to find more about Moi Health, join their early access waitlist ahead of their spring 2026 launch, which has happened very recently, hasn't it? So
Yes.
they are, so head over to moihealth.com. And if you're interested in what AutoImmune is working on in precision immunology, you can check them out at OtoImmune.com as well. We'll link everything in the description of the episode. So to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in again to Keep Science. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.
This podcast was produced by Keep It Science, a collaboration between Acorn Scientific Marketing and Zeke's Art for Geeks, two award-winning science communication and marketing agencies based in the UK. If you enjoyed the episode and you're thinking about launching your own podcast, whether it's to share some expert insights, tell your company's story, or build market presence, we'd absolutely love to help you create a podcast with outstanding science and production quality.
So drop us a line at keepitscience@gmail.com, find us on LinkedIn, and if nothing else, keep it science.